Can you tell me the price of this bed?
$8,000.
Why, that's preposterous. I can get the same bed anywhere in town for $25.
Yes, but not with me in it.
Welcome to the Marx Brothers Council Podcast, Episode 9, A Goodbye from MGM.
Goodbye.
For this edition of the podcast, we're going to be seizing danger by the collar and devoting an entire show to The Big Store, the only Marx Brothers film the watching of which is officially classified as an extreme sport. Is it their worst film ever? Is it the worst of their best, the best of their worst, or even an underrated minor pleasure? We're going to be answering that question once and for all, definitively and scientifically, with the aid of Gestalt psychology, graph paper, and a lead ball on a string. So without further ado, let me introduce our store detectives. My name is Matthew Coniam, but then you could say that about almost anybody. But who is this, lurking in the half-light of a late afternoon in New York? Why, it's a writer, a performer, a composer, and the man who reassembled and recreated the lost Marx Brothers musical I'll Say She Is, and restaged it off-Broadway, underneath Broadway, and just to one side of Broadway. And look out, Broadway, his sense of direction is getting better all the time. It's Noah Diamond.
Yes, thank you very much. Here I am again with $1,000 for one of our couples.
And what is there left to say about Bob Cassell that hasn't already been said a million times, apart, obviously, from that thing he specifically told us not to mention? I wish I could say more about that. It's juicy stuff, but the legal documents have been signed, and believe me, this guy keeps lawyers the way the rest of us keep pets. So I'll just stick to the safe stuff and say that he's a top-class editor, a first-class pop culture historian, an economy-class traveller, a working-class hero, and yes, a world-class kibitzer. And when he's not eating hot dogs, he's displaying a near mystic gift for ferreting out overlooked Marxian trivia and slotting it into bold new hypotheses. So it's a good thing for the rest of us that he's usually eating hot dogs. I've already said his name, but if, like me, your memory is not what it used to be, take this as a friendly reminder. The man of whom I speak is Mr. Bob Sing While You Gassell.
Hi, everybody, and I'm looking forward to talking about The Big Store, probably a lot more than I was looking forward to watching it.
So here we are, home again, and keen as mustard, but mustard's no good without roast beef, so in the absence of any roast beef, here's a fine old ham. Nick Santamaria is an actor, a comedian, a singer, a writer, a composer, and a show business and film historian. He's appeared in The Producers on Broadway. He originated the role of the genie in Disney's Aladdin the Musical off-Broadway. He's garnered rave reviews in such classics as A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. He co-wrote, composed, and starred in the original musical Real Men. He's the Biffle half of Biffle and Schuster, the greatest 1930s comedy double act of the 21st century, and he's the co-author of the forthcoming masterpiece, The Annotated Abbott and Costello. He's played an accountant and a sword salesman in the movies, a tour guide and Jerry Lewis on TV. But has he played piano in a whorehouse? The only way to find out is to ask Nick Santamaria.
Hello, everyone. What an introduction. My God. It's like you introduced a crowd.
Have you ever played piano in a whorehouse?
No. I have played Hamlet, though, in a whorehouse.
In a whorehouse,
yes. And they all ran away, which made me very melancholy.
It's The Big Store this time, and I'd like to just go through some background because it's not as widely known as the background to some of their other films, so you listening at home can skip this bit if you find it boring, but Nick, Bob, and Noah will just have to sit here and put up with it. It's 1941. They've just completed their undisputed masterpiece, Go West, and much to Chico's dismay, Groucho is sticking to the pledge that he made back at the time about the circus, that the third film under their new contract would be their last as a team. In the light of a new Latin American craze in Hollywood, the film was originally announced as a musical to be set in Argentina and called, imaginatively enough, Argentina. Nat Perrin was said to be writing the treatment, and Ed Bazell was penciled in to be their first three-in-a-row director.
What's the store going to be in Argentina?
No, it's just going to be an Argentine musical. No stores involved, so far as I'm aware. MGM Publicity promised that the Marxists would become the wild men of the Pampas, but the project came to naught, possibly because the Ritz brothers slipped out their Argentine Nights in 1940. The odd thing is that it was that film's writer-composers, Ray Golden, Sid Culler, and Hal Bourne, who ended up writing the Marx Picture. which can't be a coincidence. But the most satisfying explanation, which is that obviously that the writers were booked to write Argentina and then were retained by MGM after it was dropped, and that script was passed on to the Ritzes and actually became Argentine Nights, is sadly ruled out, or appears to be, by the chronology. So there's a mystery there. One wonders also if the musical act Six Hits and a Miss, who appear in the Sing While You Sell number, earned their spot after appearing with Carmen Miranda the year before in Down Argentine Way, and also if such little touches as the sign referencing Admiral Dewey, the line Remember the Main, and Groucho saying Adios, Senor, also strayed in from the original concept. While it's well known that Go West was first originated back in 1935 as a superior Culmer and Ruby script, it's less well known that the same was also true of The Big Store. Variety mentions in 1935 that they're considering a department store idea, and then again, before A Day at the Races was announced in 1936, it says that the department store project has been delayed because the music hasn't been finished. Another Culmer and Ruby script does exist under that title, and it's quoted in Roy Blount's book, Hell Euphoria, and so presumably elsewhere. Originally announced as Bargain Basement, Step This Way, and briefly Gin Rummy, though not as Groucho's preferred choice, the Philadelphia Store, The Big Store credits Nat Perrin with original idea, and that original idea was presumably episode 15 of Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel, with which it shares the department store setting, and of course the character names Flywheel and Ravelli. Nothing else is used from the episode, however, and I don't know if any of it was filtered into the Culmer and Ruby script in the way that some Flywheel material made its way into Culmer and Ruby's Duck Soup. In the event, Buzzell did not direct. The director is Charles Reisner, whose career goes all the way back to silent films. He directed Steamboat Bill Jr., and he appears as an actor in Chaplin's A Dog's Life and the Kid. It was apparently he who introduced Chaplin to Lita Grey, so The Big Store is not the biggest disaster with which he was associated. MGM's promotion largely centred around it being their last movie, making a gimmick out of a decision that they would presumably have insisted upon if it wasn't voluntary, but still hypocritically pretending otherwise with a trailer in which rampaging hordes are seen supposedly protesting the idea.
And so, to all of you, a fond farewell.
But my favourite bit of desperate pre-release publicity has to be this. It appeared in Rockaway Beach Wave, which is apparently a real publication, on August the 28th, 1941. Groucho and Chico are trying to persuade the silent member of their provocative family to go brunette in quotes, in Step This Way, the new bit of Marx madness now being shot in quotes, at Metro. For years, Harpo has worn an orange-coloured wig which photographs like a dizzy blonde. Now the other brothers want him to dye it black and part it in the middle.
Shemp Howard.
You have to feel for these publicity guys, you know. Can you imagine him going home to his wife, I sat in that office all day and all I came up with was they wanted him to dye his hair black and part it in the middle. As he puts a gun to his temple,
Well, it's funny because with The Big Store, I like the middle part best.
I think maybe they were just trying to get him to wear Groucho's wig from At the Circus and Go West. That's a perfect description.
Yes, they put so much money into that wig.
Yes.
Yes, oh yes.
It's got to work on one of these guys.
It made him look so much younger.
I mean, that's the great thing about Charles Reisner. That's his biggest contribution, isn't it? The wig's gone.
Yeah, thank God.
Absolutely.
Thank God Buzzell
and Groucho is behaving like Groucho.
Yes.
More or less, again, yeah.
Matthew, why don't you tell about what supposedly happened at the end of the last day of filming?
Yes, that's a great story as well, isn't it? Supposedly, another delightful publicity piece, which never fails to bring me to bitter tears. It was that on the last day of shooting, they made a bonfire of their costumes and threw on their wigs and coats and watched them burn to ashes. And then
they threw Zeppo on the fire.
Yeah.
And then 6 years later, at Night in Casablanca, they had to start again from scratch. Hence Harpo's hair.
It's like the comic book cover, Superman no more. He's burning his costume. He's turning his back on the world.
So yeah, it's The Big Store, and it's a big surprise right at the top of the show, isn't it? The Marx Brothers and Tony Martin, the only time that they shared above the title billing with somebody else.
True, yeah.
Do we know how that came about? Was it the agent's insistence, or did they think
it could have been the agent? But I suspect it's just MGM insurance, because a strange thing about Go West is that it had a lot of cost cutting. A lot of corners were cut. As we know, there's an entire song that's missing that's still listed in the credits. And the film came in under budget, and they obviously didn't realize there was a clause in the Marx's contract that their films had to have a production budget of at least $1 million, and this one came in just under, and the Marxes screwed MGM out of a $50,000 bonus. So I think this time MGM said, right, we'll give you your full budget, but we're going to insure it by bringing in Tony Martin. And obviously it worked, because it was their only MGM film to show a small profit on first run.
They were also giving Tony Martin a big push at that time. He had come from 20th Century Fox, where they really didn't know what to do with him. And MGM took him on, and I think this was this was the big push, one of the big pushes they were doing for Tony Martin. He was also featured prominently in Ziegfeld Girl around the same time.
It could have also helped box office by them saying no Zeppo.
Friend of the podcast and a guest on a previous podcast, Stuart Treister, met and interviewed Tony Martin later in his life, and he had some recollections of his being cast that are, to say the least, somewhat surprising.
You see, I played the fourth Marx Brother.
Well, exactly.
Because it's just about the war.
Yeah.
And Zeppo was dismissed from the movie because he was given a 1B rating in the war, because he had a manufacturing plant where he made equipment for dashboards for military aircraft.
They were going to bring him back as their leading man for this one.
No, he always played with them. He always was in the Marx Brothers. Naturally, he was one of the four Marx. There were five. Yeah. There was Gummo, who was their agent, too.
There was even a sixth one who died in infancy.
Well, I don't remember him.
Neither did Harper.
It was a little before my time. He said to me a wonderful thing once, Groucho.
Yeah.
I said, Mr. Marx, he says, call me Groucho. I said, I'm very honored to be in this picture. I said, you see all these people. He said, what's your problem? I said, well, I go to all the previews and I don't know what to say. They said, you like the pictures? Yes, marvelous, but I don't like to lie all the time. He said, well, do what I do. What do you do, Mr. Marx? He says, call me Groucho. He says, what do you do? He said, well, I go. He said, I just saw my friend Eddie Robinson. He played in a play in New York. And I went to see him backstage. And how was it, Groucho? I said, you'll never be better than you were tonight. To say, you'll never be better than you were tonight. And I said, thank you. He says, that has two meanings. I'm honest, that means you're rotten, and you're what either way. So when we had the preview of this picture, we couldn't run it at the university where people understood jokes. At UCLA, they used to have sneak preview. For comedy, they have to run a picture, see whether it's funny.
Cut things out, slow things up.
So they had to run it in Santa Monica, and all the old Jewish people came who didn't understand. But I sang a song in there called the Tenement Symphony.
Right, that was.
And they thought that was sensational. I sang the Cones and the Kellys and the things, the cries of the Vanderbilt, all that stuff. And all the cards in the lobby said, Tony Martin, we need more Tony Martin. So Groucho's in the lobby in the theater, and I walk out. I had a girlfriend to date then. He says, what'd you think of the theater picture? He says to me. I says, Groucho, you'll never be better than you were tonight. And he said, you son of a bitch, he said to me. And I ran out of the theater. He thought that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Tony?
I actually got to sing If It's You with Tony Martin. He was about 98 years old, and I had seen him appear at a jazz club here in Los Angeles, and he was quite good.
For his age, you mean?
And now that I've stopped the show dead.
I didn't mean that nastily. I just, yes, for 98, yes. Okay, so we kick off with some adorable kids, some gorgeous MGM moppets playing the piano, apparently cast after a nationwide search and apparently coached by Chico in the art of piano playing. One of them being 12-year-old Richard Hayden, who appeared in a few other MGM films but died in 1949, aged just 22, of acute respiratory infection. Sorry to bring it down, but that's what happened to him. But yes, there they all are, not playing Woogie Boogie.
Yes, remember, no Woogie Boogie.
No, woogie boogie.
And speaking of cute, Chico is at his most obnoxiously cute, I think, throughout this one, isn't he?
When he says to the kids, "Hey kids, you hear that? A new conservatory." And they start jumping up and screaming like our gang kids from the MGM years.
Right.
Exactly.
A new conservatory.
And his ideas for a new conservatory aren't they? Stained glass windows is one of the things he wants to bring into this new conservatory, as if that would be a priority, as that's what the previous conservatory lacked. Stained glass windows.
Stained glass windows.
Okay, fine.
Well, what he really wants is for those kids to have the same opportunities that I have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now we've established that Chico is Ravelli, but it's not the same Ravelli from Animal Crackers. However, when they start talking about how they want to tell something to the professor, I keep thinking maybe Harpo is in charge of running this place.
Well, are we sure this cannot be the man who attended Mrs. Rittenhouse's party some years back?
It could be.
Because it has implications later when he encounters an actual Italian man. I guess we'll get to that. But, you know, this movie suggests that this character actually is Italian. Or at least is capable of reminiscing with a legitimate Italian.
Which means that Harpo is also Italian.
Yes.
Is Italian, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so if this is the same man, this casts new light on Roscoe W. Chandler's implication.
But also, Tommy, I was talking to Bob just earlier before we started. Tommy Rogers is an interesting character. I mean, obviously, we have this back plot of him coming up from the streets, and we have the Tenement Symphony as his kind of tribute to that. But that seems to me like a peculiar kind of about-face way of creating a plot setup that is very unusual. You would think he would be Hiram Phelps's son. It's very unusual that he's his protege. As Bob said, protege isn't in quotes, but he's not related in any way to Hiram Phelps. So we presume if he's got half the department store, he's inherited half the department store. Hiram Phelps must have been unmarried and childless. Martha Phelps isn't his wife. She's his sister. Douglas Dumbrell does say the old man's sister. So that means that Margaret Dumont is not a widow here. She's a spinster. So that changes her dynamic somewhat, I think. And you would think they would have just written it as a nephew or some slightly more distant relation, but no, he's his protege, which suggests an entirely undiscovered backstory about Hiram Phelps, presumably liking music and wanting to give people a chance and all that.
A confirmed bachelor.
Yeah, and yes, a confirmed bachelor. Yes, with a thing for band leaders,
or young kids growing up on the streets.
Yeah.
But of course, the fly in the ointment is Douglas Dumbrell, who is the store manager and wants to take over the department store. And to that end, he's obviously hired Crap Murders Limited, the world's worst firm of assassins, to carry out his plan. Because he specifically tells this killer that I want you to do this and make it look like an accident. And this bozo then goes into an elevator and punches him in the face, momentarily stunning him at best. He then walks out and winks at Dumbrell as if he's done his job.
He's really evil, isn't he, Mr. Grover? I mean, this is an unusual...
He's horrible.
He's out of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
He's out of Shakespeare.
Yes, he's all fresh out.
I'm fresh out of Shakespeare.
But this guy, he's going to kill people. He's going to make them suffer.
And I'm going to marry you after I kill Martha.
Oh, my goodness.
Just to get a department store.
Not nice.
That's as far yeah.
But he gets to kiss Marion Martin.
And they have to cook the books because the store apparently isn't doing so good. They have to cook the books.
Yes, it's not even doing well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can see why when they made their next movie, they had to go straight to the Nazis because from here there was nowhere else to go for villains.
Yeah.
But Dumbrell is just. I think he's a delight in this role. I mean, his part makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, he makes such blunders along the way. And he's the boss, he's the one making the decisions. The gun in the camera?
Yeah,
That's
all he has to do is get someone to stick a knife in Tommy when he walks out the store. Instead, he creates this gun.
Yeah.
This camera that you can put a gun in, and he does it himself with no gloves on.
No gloves.
He puts the gun in with no gloves on. He's great. I think he's a brilliant character.
He's brilliant.
We should have seen more of him.
He figures a shot is a shot, no matter what.
It does kind of make you long for the logical, motivated realism of his part in A Day at the Races.
Yes.
You can, as you watch this, you can hear Thalberg's corpse rotating
on a rotisserie. I was just hoping they'd kill Tommy Rogers before Tenement Symphony. It's interesting. The script by the Ritz Brothers writers. I mean, they were exclusively Ritz Brother writers. They wrote their songs. They wrote their bits. Sid Culler, Ray Golden, and Hal Fimberg. Decent writers, and they worked very well with the Ritz Brothers, I felt. I may be in the minority here, but I'm a fan of the Ritz Brothers.
I enjoy them, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy them. I mean, they're not, they're nowhere near the Marx Brothers, and their comedy material was nowhere near the level of the Marx Brothers. But their songs and dances were just delightful. They were just such highlights in the films. But how interesting that these guys ended up writing the last supposedly Marx Brother film.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. When you go through the trades, there are so many near collisions between those two acts. They're constantly compared, and there's constant talk of either them teaming up or of one of them doing something that was intended for the other. I mean, they're like the sort of they're on a constant near miss collision course really throughout their careers, and this is one of the oddest crossovers of all. And of course, it's not until Joys, is it, that they actually do team up in the form of is it Harry in Joys?
Harry
Ritz. It's Harry, isn't it? Yeah, who's on on very good form, and Groucho sadly is not. But it's not until then that they actually do collide. But they constantly threaten to.
There is a photo of them. I think it's an Actors Fund benefit of Chico, Groucho, and Harry Ritz. Dancing with Betty Grable.
Oh, yes.
And of course, they were all members of the Hillcrest Country Club and sat at the round table together.
Okay, so now the film takes a considerable leap upwards when Martha Phelps decides that Tommy needs protection, and goes through the telephone directory and instantly hits on a detective agency that happens to be staffed by Groucho and Harpo, a rare double act appearance for them in rather a good scene. I think everyone, no matter how little they like the film, like at least the setup of this scene, even if the lines aren't great. There's something rather delightful about seeing Harpo and Groucho together here, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
May I mention first a little minutia that I noticed in the scene where Margaret Dumont asks for the phone book? She does something that she would have never done in any other film. She actually sits on the edge of the desk quite comfortably and quite humanly.
Yes, I noticed that, yeah.
And looks through the phone book. Now, that may seem like, nothing to most people, but Margaret Dumont would have never done that in any other film.
She's not a widow here. She's had to be independent all her life, and
she's the sister of a homosexual store owner. Yes,
she's sitting on desks reading phone books.
Flywheel's little ad in the book doesn't have a phone number, does it?
Yeah, he's the only one with no contact information.
It just has his name, so she thinks that's the man for me.
Yeah, it's a very private detective.
I do enjoy watching Groucho and Harpo working together. That's one of the joys of this film for me. I also like the bouncy "Sing Before Breakfast" song that seemed to be playing on the radio, as Harpo's doing his shtick.
The gag is not well executed where it comes to Groucho and there's the exercise instructions coming on, and he changes it to music.
Yes.
And now, friends, stand on your head with your back against the wall. This is...
The camera's moving off it, and you sort of miss the fact that he's changed the station, and it just sounds like background music has come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good idea for gag, but not well executed, not well directed.
1, 2, now stretch.
One,
2, now stretch.
Harpo's transcription at the typewriter, I think, is genuinely funny, and it's a
Very
good
funny,
use of
yes.
Marxian logic, because he couldn't possibly be, really transcribing what she's saying. But
exactly, it's 2 jokes, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all part of the
On the
sham.
one hand, they can't hear her, and on the other hand, he is typing something. So, yeah.
Yes, and his
good,
dogged insistence on an activity which defeats its own purpose. It's very,
and I love the way it
grimace
shoots
on
off
his
and he
face.
grabs it again.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. It's laugh out loud funny. It really is laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
I also like very much Groucho telling Dumont that he'll take her case because, after all, you are a woman.
You are a woman.
You're a woman, aren't you? Yeah.
Take a good joke where you can get it department.
Mm-hmm.
At no point in the scene does Groucho actually find out what the problem is.
What the job is, yeah.
What does it matter? She's rich.
I think this is one of a number of scenes in the film, really, that are... people sort of underrate it because it's not great, and you sort of forget that although it's not great, it's a lot better than you would think it would be.
Yeah.
It's a lot better than their previous, lot better than they had been sort of around this time. There are some lines in it that aren't great, but they're pretty good. You lose either way, come up and break a window, you are a woman, aren't you? It's not great, but it's better.
And we have to celebrate the fact that Groucho's back.
Absolutely.
I feel like he took a little vacation during Go West and At the Circus. And he's back. His hairline is back. His character is back.
Yeah.
He attacks Grover immediately for no reason other than the fact that he immediately dislikes him. He's back.
He doesn't know he's a crook, but he comes in and he just goes for him. It's very, very noticeable. And I mean, this stuff is a grey area. It is a fine line. I mean, if you look particularly in Sing While You Sell, which I know even I think Noah and Bob don't like, as much as I do, but he's still sort of being an ass in that. But he's not the Bazelle ass. There's just something about I love him jitterbugging. I love that when he walks away before Virginia O'Brien comes on. He exits. He does like a stupid walk, and I just find it funny. And he does a face when he's jitterbugging. He does a face with his teeth gritted. He looks a bit like Woody Allen when he grits his teeth.
He's enjoying himself.
So he's still really selling it, but he's not that Bazelle Groucho. I can't. It's hard to define, but yeah, he's back.
It's Groucho during the swing era, and it works. I think it works. I'm a big fan of that song. I think it's quite enjoyable, and it's boosted heavily by Virginia O'Brien's performance, which is what I find in my lifetime of Marxian madness. Most people remember that best about this film is Virginia O'Brien.
Yeah,
I guess that doesn't say much for the film, but still, it's I find it very interesting. She's very funny.
It's a good turn.
Very funny, very striking, very beautiful. Yeah.
So, getting back to the detective office, or did we leave the detective office?
No, we're still there.
I like the telegram, the hand behind the closet.
Yeah.
That Harpo reloads after he hands him the telegram. But let's get to the worst joke.
I could have sworn I shaved this morning.
I could have sworn I shaved this morning. I've never understood that joke.
What does it mean?
What does it mean? What could it possibly mean?
Because you know how when you don't shave, sometimes you huge
you
handfuls
shed
of fur
huge amounts of hair. Yeah,
yes.
Happens to me all the time. It's an Italian trait.
But I think that's just to remind us, that it's not that Go West is full of lines like that, pointless, meaningless lines. I thought it was fungus with buttons, and first business I've done with a dust storm, all that stuff. It's just one, just to rub it in. I think that this film is basically better than that. That's how I look at it.
Go West! Don't get me started.
Well, one of the things that makes this a little nicer is it's, it doesn't hurt that we're back in a contemporary urban environment.
Back in the real world.
Yeah.
Which is where they should
be. Where they belong.
Yeah.
Although
Definitely.
it seems like at MGM that they tried to make Maggie's reaction to Groucho a little more realistic in Opera and Races. And here when she comes in, he does absolutely nothing to alleviate her fears or to actually make a good impression, but she's on board for reasons that I can't understand. And it's not like they have a prior relationship where she trusts him or finds him attractive, but I wish there was something in there to make it to sell it a little more. That why she continues on with this after that initial meeting.
I suppose she's impressed by Harpo's subterfuge. That obviously works. All those tricks designed to deceive her obviously work. But yeah, she obviously just looks at this guy and thinks that's a detective. That's a detective, all right.
It tells you how things have changed, though, because in the Paramount films, Margaret Dumont's unswervable faith in Groucho was better. It was better for not being logical or having an explanation.
Right. It fit in with the mood of the films.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. I mean, it doesn't have a valid explanation, but there's usually, like even in Duck Soup, she does already know him. That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although she has no reason to have any faith in him, at least, there is some kind of history. But here she's just found him in a phone book.
I think she's delightful in this film. I love how game she is, and how she and Groucho just immediately bond. They're Grover's out of the picture, like at the beginning of the movie. It's Groucho wins.
I mean, I wonder how much of this is a legacy of the original casting, because as we know, Martha Phelps was originally going to be Marion Martin's part,
right? Which I can't see at all.
She had been cast as Lulu Bell in Go West, and then had fallen ill at the very last minute. And they said, right, you can have a part in our next film as compensation. And she was going to be Martha Phelps. And then when it was decided that they were going to make a big deal of it being their last film, they said, right, we must have Margaret Dumont in this. So she took over Martha Phelps. So I wonder if a lot of the stuff with Martha Phelps was originally written to be much more sexual. So immediately, I imagine I see Flywheel being more flirty in that scene originally, and then there's that very strange bit where they quote Byron and Shelley at each other, which doesn't really come to a joke.
Well, the Burma
Shelley
is sort of a joke.
Well, to a point, but there's a hell of a lot of them just kind of flirting in a way that is never undercut, or in that sequence isn't undercut as it usually is with an insult from Groucho.
True.
Are Grover and Martha already an item or engaged?
They're engaged, yes.
And she's flirting with Groucho right off the bat.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So I get the feeling that was originally meant to be a much younger, more attractive woman.
That Phelps family.
And that slightly makes more sense of this stuff. But the net result, seeing Margaret Dumont doing that, it is a delight, I think.
I think so, too. I think it was a great swan song for Maggie.
It's interesting to think of in this recent rewatch for this podcast. I was more conscious than I have been in the past when watching The Big Store of the fact that, they all believed this. Yeah, in general. I tried very hard to stay conscious.
I was just more conscious this time. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I saw the movie. And, but, they all knew, or they all believed that it was their last film, or their last film as a team. And I tried to put myself in their heads a little bit. And, there is a kind of sweetness to the Dumont and Groucho stuff here that I don't know if it was because of this, but it felt a little bit like, this is, maybe our last time around the block until we do the Hollywood Palace in 20 years.
Right, I think it has a genuine charm, I think it is like, let's go out with a nice big send-off. And obviously the script isn't quite up to that, but they are. I think they're all giving it. They're all on. Yeah,
and that kind of gives it the warmth that was missing from the previous two films.
We have to remember too that it was 1941, and comedy itself, in general, became a kinder, gentler thing.
Yeah.
People were rushing to see Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland movies, and things of that ilk. And the Marx Brothers had to fall into line, I suppose.
Yeah.
Now, was this pre-war, or I know it's 41?
June of 41.
Yeah, we weren't there yet.
We were.
You were, definitely. But we had to wait till December.
It's an important question because we have a funny Italian in it, and this whole Night at the Opera thing about were those Italian cuts to appease Italy, or were they to get rid of Italy? Here we have a very jolly Italian right on the 11th hour of World War II, don't we?
Right. In fact, we have several of them if you count the children, and even more if you count that wife.
So if MGM had done the cuts for opera in the late 30s, apparently by this point they didn't care what the Italian reaction would be.
Exactly, but yes, I mean, obviously there's nothing. It's only like an amusing Italian character, exactly akin to Chico, isn't it? But if they were in a kind of we don't want Italians in our movie kind of frame of mind, then obviously that would have gone. I think. I think it's a little small hint that it was.
Dean Martin did a screen test for MGM in the early 40s. And Louis B. Mayer's response was, "What do we want with another Italian singer?" And he was referring to Tony Martin. He obviously didn't realize that Tony Martin was Jewish and from New York.
It did look like an Italian suit he was wearing.
Tony gets our next scene all to himself after Groucho and Margaret drive off, and we welcome home Admiral Dewey, the hero of Manila. We get the famous recording booth scene. Why, it's Mr. Rogers, Celebrity Day. And there's this whole strange thing about how famous is he? Is he a famous man or not? Some people seem to know him. Yeah. Some people don't have a clue who he is. He's on the cover of that sheet music. That old woman knows him, but
Clara Blandick seems to be his biggest fan.
Yes, that's right. So he records it on that wonderful little home recording device, which I would love to have one of those. But let's not forget that "If It's You" is Mr. Nick Santamaria's favorite song from any Marx Brothers movie. Is that not correct?
Right, straight song.
Straight song.
Written by Ben Oakland, Milton Drake, and Artie Shaw.
Whose names appear on that brief shot of the sheet music, don't they?
Right.
It says performed by Tommy Rogers, but it's got the real writers' names, which is very nice.
And apparently, it was, and I don't know if this is true, I used to date a British woman, and her father was the last editor of the TV Times, Matthew. Grant Lockhart, yeah.
Oh, yes.
And Grant was a good friend of mine, and he told me that "If It's You" was set to be a hit in America, but
tell what you heard in this film.
But something happened. I don't know if it was wartime related or something. But like the Tenement Symphony, it was more of a hit in England than it was in America.
That's interesting. I know Tenement Symphony had a quite a big presence over here. Yes, I didn't know that about "If It's You" as well. Yeah,
but we'll get to Tenement Symphony as we go.
I do like it. I'm not so keen on that line, "I'll rush across the floor." I think that's a slightly contrived rhyme, and I always picture him sort of scuttling on all fours.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I imagined him drunk, sort of crawling, Ray Milland-like across the floor. Yes. She got in touch with me.
Stagger across the floor.
Yeah. Did we ever establish what the B-side was of this?
I think it was Flight of the Bumblebee. I'm not sure.
Revolution 9, I think.
I always forget the lyrics to that. But anyway, so I think that's a very sweet scene. That scene never bothered me. It never bored me, as other numbers might have in the previous films. And it's heads above things like "Step Up and Take the Bow." Oh my God. Yeah. But it's actually a good 1940s ballad that I think should have been more popular than it was.
And for such a big store, they seem to be out of everything people are coming to buy.
They don't have the material for her hat, for Marion Martin's hat. They don't have the record. It's true.
And the other thing that strikes me is once he starts performing that, he doesn't draw a crowd.
Yeah.
When he finishes, it's still just that one woman stood there.
Yeah, what are the odds? We don't have the record, but we have the singer, and only you care.
Well, the people were all at home listening to the record.
So the people
sold out the record. And you wonder, Clara Blandick, who played the old lady who wanted the record, was a suicide later on.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A very tragic character. Yeah, she was ended up in an old age home, and she's in The Wizard of Oz, yeah? She's the... Yeah, she is. She's an aunt. Yeah. She actually took poison and put a plastic bag over her head to end her life. And I think she was playing that record at the time. I'm not sure.
Yes, must have, yeah.
I wasn't going to go there. I was really trying hard here. Really trying hard.
Bob, I go there.
My goodness. And that's why Groucho has that chilling line. You can put your head in a bag, but we'll have to tighten your brakes. And
that's how he got his reputation as a fresh guy. He's putting everybody's head in a bag.
Well, now that we've gotten rid of our listeners.
Yes. So now Groucho meets Grover.
I'll miss them.
Groucho meets Grover, and look at him come into that room. He throws his fur coat on the sofa. He flings his hat up on the lights.
Oh yeah,
doesn't he, as if they're a hat stand. Yeah, and misses. He steals a cigar. He strikes a match against his thigh. I mean, this is Groucho again, isn't it?
Groucho's back. Groucho's back.
Yeah.
This is my favorite scene in the film.
And he's swimming in his tailcoat.
Oh, and a favorite line of mine is when he looks at Grover's coat and feels the material, and he says, "Oh, the same tailor. How much do you own?" I love that line.
Yeah, and the energy is I think it's we're right back at kind of Night at the Opera kind of energy.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't quite have that script, but
but still,
we've got the zip, we've got the pace, we've got the attack
for no apparent reason.
Yeah. And then it pays off in that lovely line. I told you in the first reel he was a crook at the end.
Yeah.
But I love how he attacks him. I love his questions to Grover's questions.
It's bargain day. The store is crowded. A woman faints. What do you do?
How old is she?
What difference does that make?
Yeah, it feels exactly right, even when the material isn't quite golden age best. It feels right.
Right.
Although it does, obviously, as we all know, take a very strange turn when Tommy comes in, and and Groucho and Tommy kind of flirt. There's no two ways about it. They kind of hit on each other.
Well, I think you're great. What do you really think of me? Well, I think you're wonderful. Do you think I'm any good? Man, you're terrific. How am I? All right? Want to know? You're sensational. I could listen to this man forever.
Well, I mean, think about what we said about Hiram Phelps. I mean,
but for Groucho to fall for that.
Yeah. I've brought this up many times before, but that exchange just baffles me. It sounds like it's leading up to a fantastic punchline, but the fantastic punchline never comes, and not even a bad punchline. There's like no punchline.
It's just love at first.
They're sort of rubbing against each other, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Groucho's almost kind of putting his head on the guy's shoulder, isn't he? It's a very strange
and eating it up.
Exchange.
You look at his face; he keeps looking back at the others to say, almost as if to say, "Do you hear this? Isn't this great? Look, he loves me. This guy loves me."
It almost feels like the attitude that Groucho assumes toward Alky Briggs in Monkey Business. The first year we have our squabbles, but the situation is so different.
Right.
In that case, he's answering a tough guy with all this flirtatious stuff, and it's a sign of Groucho's audacity.
He's still being a wise ass. Yeah.
But there's no...
I wonder if that's meant to be the idea, yes, that he's but he plays it so sincerely.
He does. Yeah. He's really enjoying it. It's like, scratch my back,
Yeah.
Which would have been a better punchline.
But what about Zeppo? When Zeppo was like, I'm proud to be your son. I mean, he doesn't always react like that to getting the compliments.
Yeah, well, maybe it's because Tony Martin is billed above the title, and that's just that's sexy in a way.
And it's not just that he responds; it's that he keeps fishing, doesn't he? Like, am I all right?
Well, I think. Well, Matthew, I think that's the joke. That's the joke that leads up to no punchline. But it's Groucho just fishing. He's fishing for more. Give me more. Give me more. It would have worked actually if they had a more satisfying punchline.
Yeah, or if it was he was talking to a woman. I mean, obviously, if he was talking to a woman, it would be fine. If it was Stan Todd.
In that scene, I think Chico has perhaps the most inane line he's ever had in any film or any appearance he ever made. And are you ready?
Sure.
You better let Flywheel handle this case. He's a smart man. Now, I'm thinking back to Our Gang and what MGM did to Our Gang, and the endings of those films were "We'll never be bad boys again." Dun, 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 dun. It's along those lines. It's like, what? Chico Marx, this once funny man who was given decent material to say, was given this line.
Yeah.
You better let Flywheel handle this case.
Well, you remember one of Chico's lines from the film, which is more than I can.
I watched it last night and made notes, actually.
I like when he says, "You and me are going to be insufferable."
Insufferable. That's a good line.
Bad. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah.
But the nitrate line.
But it's too late for Chico, isn't it? It's just too late.
It really is.
The man who the man who gets paid more for not rehearsing than performing is
Mm-hmm.
already the man who says to whatever her name is, Judy, you can fire me. Yeah, you don't have to pay me, but you can't fire me. So he's finished.
If this is their farewell performance, you would think he and Groucho would have one last go at it.
Yeah,
Right,
it's a shame.
You would hope.
It's a
You would
little,
hope.
like, in this scene, it's presented as a revelation that Harpo and Chico are brothers. But Harpo works for Groucho, and Groucho does not seem to have ever encountered Chico before.
Yeah, I think I always get the impression that they were separated somehow. Maybe at Ellis Island.
Yes.
But then there's that line, he's a no driver, that's my brother. Right?
Yeah.
And he scratches his back and stuff. But Chico was gone by this time. Actually, watching the film again last night, I came away forgetting about Chico. I forgot he was in the film, basically, except for the piano duet.
Yeah.
And a couple of other minor scenes. He's not in the film.
The only thing I can recall about his performance is that he's the one who actually lunges at Grover and grabs the gun.
Yeah,
That's
true.
At the end.
That's true.
Okay, yeah. I presume the story about him is true, that by this time he literally counted his lines.
He'd count the lines.
And he didn't care what they were as long as he had a sufficient number.
Now, I wonder if that's apocryphal or not.
Who knows? But, I can't imagine, for somebody who still cared, and he did, he did still want to be making those movies, why he couldn't, just say, for Christ's sake, give me something funny.
I think you have to be there in order to do something like that,
yeah.
And his mind was
I
on
appreciate
other
he is the hardest to write for. I've always said that.
Oh, without a doubt. And
at the same time, they just stopped trying,
I'll go further. I think he's the most limited of the brothers. The three brothers.
He's the most specialist, certainly.
Yeah, well, by that time, actually, by the time they were making the movies in the 1930s, what he was doing was already passé. The dialect comedians.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it was
Park
just
Your
sheer
Carcass.
fluke that he happened to be brilliantly funny. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I watched a movie called, in fact, it's a Kalmar and Ruby script, a movie called Life of the Party. And it's a Joe Penner film. He's the star. And Park Your Carcass is in it, Harry Einstein. And he's a Greek dialect comedian. And they wrote Chico Marx scenes for him. And they're funnier than anything Chico did in most of the MGM films.
Yeah. At least in At the Circus and Go West, they were trying, even if they were misdirected. They were trying to give him something, yeah.
Although they were giving him lines like, hey, tadpole, you better get out of the water. I tend to remember really terrible dialogue from their films. I don't know. It just amuses me.
Well, speaking of terrible dialogue, this scene where Groucho faces off with Grover for the first time includes Grover's line,
"Why, this place is becoming a madhouse."
Which Adamson points out as this seems to be the writer's way of saying, if only this place were becoming a madhouse.
Which is quite true.
It does smack of desperation.
It's a little soon to be saying that. I also find the intro into Sing While You Sell very interesting.
How do you expect me to run a store with you maniacs, destroying priceless antiques, insulting customers, disturbing the general routine? No wonder business is bad.
Mr. Grover, you are just a quack to me. Though I may insult you, don't talk back to me.
Yeah, all of a sudden, oh my God, we're in a production number. I had no idea.
It's very interesting.
Oh, before that, though, I must just very briefly crave your indulgence, and I must own up to an egregious error in my book. This is the first in a series that I'm going to call Owning Up to Egregious Errors in My Book. There's the line, he's all right, he's the detective here, when Harpo brings the purse back. There's about a page in my book devoted to what a peculiar line that is, because Harpo is suddenly become the store detective, and why has that not been known? And of course, he isn't. The line is being said to Harpo about the other guy in the scene. So that entire page of my book is absolute drivel, and it will disappear in the second edition. So
wait a second. Okay.
You must have been out on a tear last night.
So that being said, my soul is purged, and let's sing while we sell. Yes.
Let me fish your book out of the garbage pail. Hold on. Here it is.
Hey, as long as we're indulging each other.
Who are you, Hiram Phelps?
I would love to point out The sign outside the store says that Phelps Department Store was established in 1857.
Yep.
Yes.
Which makes it 1 year older than Macy's.
Mm-hmm.
Also older than Bloomingdale's, Gimbel's, B. Altman, and Bergdorf Goodman, but not as old as Lord and Taylor, established in 1826.
Do you know the story behind Lord and Taylor?
I loved him, hated her.
Lord is actually referring to God.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Taylor was a rather religious man, so it was Lord and Taylor. There is no Mr. Lord who was a partner.
Wow.
So there you go.
Okay.
What other podcast gives you stuff like this?
No other podcast.
Name it.
I listened to 4 yesterday that said the exact same thing. So where are we?
We're at Sing While You Sell, and it's,
that's why
everybody
we keep
hates
putting
it.
it off.
I like it. Groucho is enjoying himself. He's visibly enjoying himself.
That's
We know
yes,
Groucho.
yes.
We know Groucho. If he's not enjoying himself, he will not pretend he is. So he is. And it's a fun song. It's a great song. The biggest problem I have with it is that Chico's not there. I don't know why he's not
I noticed
there.
that last
It seems
night.
such a shame.
Last night when Groucho and Harpo
Yeah.
were dancing around on that moving platform, where was Chico? I assume the track or that whorehouse that I played piano in, but
Well, yes, but you'd think he would have been written in there somewhere. Just a little burst of piano, or just hanging about with Harpo. Yeah, it's a shame, but I think it's a better song than it's given credit for. I know, he's telling them to step up and sell things and all that stuff, but he's not really. He's being silly because obviously singing won't help you sell things. And I think some of the lines are good. To smart affairs, my lady wears this step in to step out. I think that's
Very
pretty
clever.
good.
Mm-hmm.
I
only wish there was a hair more set up to it, where Grover was saying something along the lines like, "Now, don't interact with my employees, or don't do anything
Immediately
to
makes
disturb
him
the
want to
store."
do it.
Don't sing while you're
right. For crying out loud, yeah. It does go. It is a rather abrupt intro into the song. But once you get into the song, I agree with Matthew. I think it's a lot of fun. And when Groucho dances with the girl,
great dancing,
which Frank Ferrante actually put into his show. I think an earlier version of it.
He's very Ferrante-ish in this number, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. That's
he
an
really
interesting
is. Yeah,
observation.
he's got that Ferrante vibe. Yeah, he has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Ferrante-ish.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think
Ferrante-esque.
It's Ferrante-esque. Yeah.
I always thought that this number, especially the fashion show section of the number, where Groucho's narrating his way through all these looks, it's always struck me as so similar to a Danny Kaye, Sylvia Fine number.
It is along those lines.
Yeah. It feels a lot like Anatole of Paris or any of that specialty material. And I always took it as kind of conforming to the Comedy Times.
I read that.
But no, Danny Kaye, he became a nightclub star in New York in 1940. His first Broadway show was the same year as The Big Store, and he didn't make his first film with Goldwyn until 44. So it wasn't, I don't think it could have been a Kaye Fine influence, but that kind of stuff must have just been in the air.
Have you ever heard that Danny Kaye was heavily influenced by Harry Ritz?
Yeah, it feels that way, and it feels like Groucho is consciously doing something a little different, doing a different kind of comedy than usual. There's also a brief moment when he's being carried in a rickshaw, which is a pleasant
throwback to
momentary evocation, of Animal Crackers.
I like the Technicolor line in the fashion.
Technicolor line, it's another.
It's nice,
fourth wall breaking line, and 4 singers of color singing about cotton. That's aged well.
That was that didn't make me cringe too much.
I do like when he comes on and does his own little fashion bit with his hair sticking up in a point.
He looks like one of them.
I like the way that when he then goes off to Virginia O'Brien, they could easily have just cut there and put him back to himself, but he goes off to Virginia O'Brien still with his hair sticking up in that strange way.
And he looks like one of the Munchkins.
I find that very sweet.
He looks like a Munchkin from The Wizard of Oz.
Yes, he really does. I was thinking that this number kind of makes it impossible for me to believe that Dr. Hackenbush was excluded from Day at the Races because Groucho didn't feel like rehearsing and filming it. As we've been told sometimes, because he was willing to spend, I'm sure, days, if not weeks, on this number.
Yeah, this was a big production number. This was a big MGM production
Big number, yeah. And Groucho is getting the starring role in it. I think it's a lovely little number.
Me too.
I really
Me
do.
too. And when the platform starts moving towards the elevator,
it's
nice. Actually exciting. It's actually a very uplifting moment.
It feels
full of energy.
Yeah.
We should acknowledge that a lot of fans do not like this. And all we could say is that, you got to take the entertainment where you could get it in these later films. And if it's not Hooray for Captain Spaulding, it's certainly entertaining on its own terms.
Mm-hmm. As with the whole film, the material is what falls short, I mean, the musically it's fine. But you do have, we've cut the price of rugs in half. We've cut our rugs today. There's a rug sale on in a rug salon. We're cutting rugs in a solid way. It's like halfway.
Well, in a very 1940s swing time way, again, conforming to the times.
But it feels to me like the work of people who are putting some effort in, whereas the previous two films, particularly the previous one film, feels like people who simply don't care. Performers who don't want to be there and creative personnel who aren't interested in what they're doing. And this time, I think there's a much more of a feeling that this is something the people who are doing it want to do, and it's got energy and pace and zip.
I agree. Do you think there's a possibility that the three Ritz brother writers looked at this as a step up and wanted to impress MGM, for crying out loud?
Yes.
So they really did give it a shot.
That's a good point, yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Harpo and Groucho start playing cards while all the dancers are dancing.
Yes.
That's something Harpo would normally do with Chico.
Yeah, exactly. He should just be sat there, shouldn't he?
Yeah, he should have been playing cards.
He probably was out playing cards.
I think you could eliminate the probably.
Okay, so now we meet our villainess, Peggy, Marion Martin, in the role which I I suspect was written in just for the sake of giving her something to do once she'd been written out of the Martha Phelps part, because it absolutely comes to nothing. Very much, bizarrely, very much like Esther Muir in
A Day at the Races, who just disappears.
She's set up as serving a purpose, and then she vanishes. But it's a nice scene. It's very funny. I love, obviously, her having the back of her dress cut away. And I think, she does very well. It's a good little scene, I think.
I think when she says to Harpo, "Out of my way, stupid," that's a low point in the canon.
Yes, except that he then has his revenge.
He does, yes.
It does sort of set up her humiliation at the end. But I agree with you, Noah. It's a bit ham-fisted.
This lady is basically helping plot to kill our hero, and she's called the Marxist idiots. And all she gets in return is a little indignation that Harpo used to do on women for no reason at all in previous films.
But I have to say, Bob, it does work. It does work. I've seen this film actually quite a lot with an audience. When I was growing up in New York, we had a theater called the Mini Cinema in Uniondale, Long Island. And they were one of the champions of bringing back the Marx Brothers in the late 60s and early 70s. And the big store actually had a lot of big laughs in it, from what I recall. And that was one of the biggest. But then at that time, I realized that the Marx Brothers were so popular that, again, they could have read the phone book and the audience would have been screaming.
Oh, of course. I think that's a funny gag. I just think that there's so much setup for it where Harpo used to just do that for no reason at all. Right. That would be a throwaway gag in Horse Feathers.
I wanted to see her set on fire. But
true, but at least he's doing it at all, though. He doesn't do anything like that in the previous two, does he? Or the previous three, actually.
Right.
It is a kind of a Paramount-ish thing for him to do, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. Does anyone notice the music playing in the background?
I didn't, actually, no.
It's actually a hit song from the period. It's called "Yes, My Darling Daughter."
I love that song, and I didn't notice that's what it was.
That's the music.
I love that song, yes.
Yeah, me too.
Andrew's sisters do a lovely version of it, yeah.
Dinah Shore had a big hit with it, too. But I've noticed in this film, more than any of their other films, they call it Mickey Mousing. There's a lot more underscoring in this film than in any other, and sound effects. The boings, and the slide whistles, and all that
Swanee
stuff.
whistles, and
Again, giving into the times. There was a lot of that going on.
Yeah, the scene when Harpo is taking all the junk out of the car, and then puts it back in quickly when the cop returns. It's almost hilarious, and it feels like it could, but doesn't, build to something like the knife dropping.
It just fades.
You know, if it just crossed that threshold of plausibility where there was too much stuff in the car and he was too adept with it. But one of the reasons it doesn't quite come off is because there's this comedy music, this kind of bassoon line plodding along behind it to let you know how funny it is.
I also have a theory that Douglas Dumbrille actually paid the authors to write a scene where he got to kiss Marion Martin. Douglas Dumbrille never kissed anybody in any film ever.
Yeah, that's harder to believe than the Marx's roller skating, is that she would.
He gets a good solid kiss in, too. I mean, go Doug. Go Doug.
Could we do that again, guys?
Yeah. We need another take.
Where's Sam Wood when you need him?
But yeah, she was a beautiful woman, Marion Martin, former showgirl, Ziegfeld showgirl.
Yes, there are some risque shots of her, aren't there? If you want to Google her, if you do a Google image search,
I wouldn't mind
you might want to put a sheet over the budgerigars cage first.
Well, now we've really lost our listeners. Now they're all looking.
Don't worry, they'll turn up.
They're all looking for pictures of Marion Martin now.
And I don't blame them.
Even I've lost interest.
What are we doing here? Come on, let's go and look at some Marion Martin pictures.
Actually,
we're stuck here, and we're stuck with the bedding department scene.
Boy.
Now,
boy.
This is a strange scene because it's one of the big comedy scenes. It's one of the sort of comedy highlights of the movie, but in actual fact, it's one of the comedy lowlights of the movie because it's one of the few points in the film, I think, where it tries too hard. In my opinion, it's sort of what the stateroom scene was like before they roadshowed it. It needs some road showing. It's an idea, and it's totally stale, isn't it? It's absolutely stale.
It couldn't even have looked good on paper.
It starts with a ridiculous premise, which is they're going to start a sale to get them out of the bedding, which is, that's ridiculous. That's a stupid plan that means nothing.
Even before that, I learned something yesterday watching the film that I never realized before. They explained why the Marx Brothers are sleeping in the bed department. They were up till 5 a.m. going over the books with Tommy Rogers, for crying out loud.
Of course they were. Of course they were.
There's a scene I want to see.
Right. That would have been a great Groucho Chico scene. So now we know why they were asleep.
We can have some funny beds.
Yes,
I've got a good idea. Let's have a load of funny beds that come out with, trick photography and oh my word!
At least they'll be ready when the audience falls asleep. Hey, press at the grapes. No press on my wife.
I think it's funny that Groucho proves to him he can't have 12 kids, and then he goes over and tries to explain that to his wife and gets a slap. That's funny. I love that line, run down and get him a bunch of grapes. But apart from that...
And don't you have any other hobbies?
Yeah.
I also like
it. When I watch The Big Store, Groucho turns to the Italian wife and says, I like my cigar too, but I take it out.
This is one they should have got. Alboesberg. Was he dead by then?
Yes, he was. Very dead.
Yeah, they should have dug up Alboesberg and roadshowed this because it's not ready, is it? This scene is not ready.
It's not. It's still
to
in
be
the
filmed.
oven. Unlike those children.
There's such a weird shot when Groucho wakes up and he's lying on his side in this bed surrounded by small children. And it's such a, if you just took that still, someone who didn't know The Big Store very well, what is this? It looks like the Wizard of Oz, like he's waking up back in Kansas, It's bizarre.
And you were there, and you were there.
Yeah.
My favorite part of that scene is the fact that Così Cosà is playing underneath as all the beds go crazy. And this is the third film that song is featured in.
Yes, it's at the races as well, isn't
That's
it?
right. At the racetrack,
yeah,
they're playing
yeah.
it. Mm-hmm. God bless MGM. They didn't waste anything except the Marx Brothers, and Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello.
We just have to be thankful they didn't bring in an African American family into there.
That's the only thing that was missing
To do a song
film.
number, yeah.
You know, some interesting people pop up. Mitchell Lewis,
including the same Red Indian that was stuck in that ridiculous scene in the previous one.
Mitchell Lewis, who had quite a career actually. He menaced Wheeler and Woolsey in The Cuckoos, and shows up in he must have made 100 films. Mitchell Lewis, usually as a bad guy, and he shows up. He has no dialogue. He just shows up because he looks like an Indian or a Native American, if you
or both.
Yeah, or both, actually. I love how all the beds pack up when the Native Americans walk in. If that isn't racist, I don't know what is. Oh my God, let's get out of here.
Oh God, that reverse film though of that bed,
oh.
that bed that comes out in like 3 parts and then goes back, and what were they thinking?
There was a very lame attempt at a wacky, zany Marx Brothers scene. And too bad for Chico. You know, it's like, he's left out to dry. He's left hanging out to dry.
And speaking of Chico left out to dry, here is another thing that opinion very much differs on, which is the piano duet.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people absolutely love this scene, Harpo and Chico together on the piano, and I get that it's nice to see them together. But what I see is Chico being ever more pushed aside. His piano spot gets shorter and shorter and shorter through the MGM films, and now the ultimate indignity is he's not even allowed to do it on his own. I can't get past that.
I can't look at it that way, because this is something they had been doing since the 1910s, this routine in vaudeville. And I think it was just... it could have been Chico himself saying, you know what, I don't feel like rehearsing a new number, let's do this. They knew it very well. It was very popular on stage, and I'm so glad we have a film record of it, you know, because they do it later on the Colgate Comedy Hour, and it doesn't have the same energy. It doesn't have... Harpo doesn't seem to be really into it like he is in the scene in the film. So I'm rather grateful that it's there.
I think I wouldn't have minded if, like, in some of the other films, if Harpo then went off and left Chico to it.
I get you. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. But I kind of find it delightful. Yeah, me too, Noah.
I mean, I don't love it in lieu of a Chico solo. I take that point. But to me, it's such a happy duet. And in fact, we recreated it a little bit in I'll Say She Is in 2016. We gave Harpo a little bit in Chico's piano piece, and recreated some of the going around the piano together. And I think, as you point out, Nick, it's so evocative of their vaudeville years.
Yeah. I think it's kind of priceless.
It is one of those things that obviously, you know, only the big store gives you, which, you know, people who write off the big store, you know, you have to say, well, it's the only one that's got a Groucho and Harpo double billing scene, and it's the only one that's got the, you know, it is one of the unique selling points. But I just think, you know,
it sticks out even more when you see what an extravagant scene that Harpo gets later on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Harpo, they put so much into Harpo and poor old Chico. But then, you know, again, you know, he doesn't care. We have to remember he doesn't really care. As long as he's on the posters, you know, as long as, you know.
And as long as the check clears.
I'm probably being...
his name's second.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. I'd love to know the story behind that.
You know, it was with Chico, it was mostly about the money.
Well, speaking of that Harpo number, that's obviously the next big scene. That enables us to skip over one of the nastiest bits in the film, which is where Tommy Rogers has a shouts at Groucho when they handcuff the wrong people.
That's uncomfortable.
And Groucho makes a kind of a sheepish, embarrassed face at him, which suddenly brings Go West back with a horrible.
That's a Go West moment.
Yeah. Though it does redeem itself slightly when Groucho starts wiggling his eyebrows at Maggie right after that.
I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
He actually ignores them after a while, and he starts flirting with Margaret Dumont. And,
okay.
So he kind of redeems himself before that scene is over. But I hate when Tony Martin turns to Groucho and slaps him on the wrist.
Has a go at him, yeah.
Give me those keys so I can unlock these handcuffs. Hurry up. What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
That's Groucho Marx. Why don't you just throw him down a stairway,
So here we are at the other mirror scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's not characteristic of the Marx Brothers, but it holds my attention for the running time it takes up, and it feels a little bit like a riff on the kind of identity gags in the duck soup mirror scene.
Yeah, this is one of the most contentious Harpo solos in that. As we know, there was a story that appeared in the trades around this time that he'd cut his hand, and that it had delayed shooting of his harp solo on this film. The late lamented George Bettinger pointed out to me that the close-ups of Harpo's hands don't seem to be his hands on the strings. They're very feminine. There's no. If you look at the shots of his actual hands, he's got good, strong veins and knuckles, and and these are very feminine hands in the close-ups. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't appear to be his hands in the close-ups.
No, I agree with you, Matthew. I don't think they are.
Yeah.
Has anyone else heard a story that MGM didn't think that Harpo's harp playing was quite up to snuff, and he was dubbed by better harpists?
I've heard the stories. Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, obviously, it's one of those things that people really, really don't want to hear, mm-hmm. but. Yes,
it's right up there with Fred Astaire's taps were dubbed in later, and sometimes Hermes Pan would do it when he didn't have time, or whatever. That
or Groucho's autographs weren't real. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are a lot of stories like that in old Hollywood. So and so didn't sing this portion of the song, or.
Yeah, I mean, and I just think my position on my default on this sort of thing is always that you don't need to worry, because it doesn't mean that they can't do it. There's all sorts of reasons why they might not have, all kinds of logistical reasons.
That's true.
Why it might not have happened. And Harpo, why he's not really that bothered. These are just movies. They're released. They might get re-released perhaps once or twice, but he doesn't know anything about home video or DVD. Mm-hmm. This isn't his legacy. I can't see it bothering him that much.
Yeah. Entertainment for the moment. But yeah, that kind of stung me when I heard it.
The thing, Nick, is that we've heard him play live enough times, in Coconuts and Animal Crackers and whatever else, the TV performances, where we know he could play well. So maybe if he didn't play on one or two specific scenes, I could live with it. It's not like he couldn't play.
Oh no, he was a wonderful musician. Definitely.
Yeah. So it doesn't bother me.
I was just kind of shocked by it. That's all. That was something highly unusual for me.
Alan Aylis and Glenn Mitchell both make the point that it's unnecessary that it is revealed at the end to be his dream. It should just be something that happens. What they don't say, of course, is how the scene should end. And how the scene should end is with Chico wandering on in a nightshirt made up like Groucho.
Oh yeah.
That should be the ending of the scene. He should just stroll on in a nightshirt with a moustache painted on, and the scene should fade.
Or all three of them get up and walk out of the scene. There's a line Chico has, another pathetic Chico line just before the harp solo. You look like a scared scarecrow.
A scared scarecrow, yes. Yeah, he says you're not dressed well enough to.
Yeah, but you look
bad
like
writing. Yeah.
He would. Why wouldn't he just say you look like a scarecrow? You look like a scared scarecrow. What the hell does that mean? And then he reveals how mediocre his dialect is by saying it's a too bad. Now I know I'm picking here. This is minutia, but it's a too bad.
Yeah,
that's just bad dialect comedy or dialogue.
How about I'm a same nationala like you?
but
nationala like you. Yeah,
that almost you could see that almost I could get.
Yeah,
but that's a too bad. He added that one note there, and it's just too much. It's too much.
I think he got paid by the syllable.
As long as he had as many syllables as Groucho. Okay, so Harpo's harp solo. I find it kind of delightful. I love when it switches to swing, as I do in all of Harpo's later solos. I enjoy when he starts playing a little boogie woogie. You know,
is this the only dream sequence in any Marx Brothers movie?
Yes, perhaps so.
I think it is.
Yeah, I believe you're right, Noah.
It's presented with a lot of confidence, the way it's framed and the way it's cut. After that bed scene, which feels sort of all over the place in terms of technique, like we're going to find a comedy scene in here one way or another. God damn it! You know?
Come hell or high water.
Yeah. The harp sequence is at least, you know, it feels like they know exactly what they're doing. It's well conceptualized.
Well, we're talking about MGM here, and you're mentioning, we mentioned two things. Sing While You Sell looks so great because it's an MGM production. The harp solo is sort of the same thing.
Yeah, this is what the director put on his reel, this stuff, yeah.
In this movie, anything nice is welcome. Like, if this harp number, if it had been in one of the better earlier films, we would probably attack it conceptually a lot more. But, you know, Harpo's in it. It's a pleasant little piece of film, and it comes in the midst of a Marx Brothers movie that we just want to like because it's a sweeter experience than the last couple, and it's in some ways their swan song.
Yes, and then as if to prove that point, we next have a long-awaited Groucho and Margaret Dumont sort of wooing scene, which is one of the most archetypal, set pieces, and it's very much a damp squib, isn't there? It's very short. It sort of comes and goes. Oh, wolf, she says to him, doesn't she? There aren't really any.
I really
quite like
that scene.
I like the idea of him being called Wolf, and I like her saying,
Wolf.
"Oh, wolf," but not much else really.
I actually like that scene.
I'm afraid after we're married a while, a beautiful young girl will come along and you'll forget all about me.
Don't be silly. I'll write you twice a week.
Yeah, that's the one, what Adamson mentions in his book about the one of the studio heads who wanted it out and saw it at the preview and it got the biggest laugh.
It was demanded, excised from the film, but it found its way back in, and Chico said, let's just say the god of comedy.
Who he was not on good terms with at that point.
But, you know, this really throws the whole plot line into disarray because it doesn't matter what happens to Tommy. If Martha's not going to marry Grover, it doesn't matter what happens to Tommy.
That's right.
Oh,
You're absolutely right. Unless he kills Groucho as well. But what about...
no doubt he will, that fiend.
And what about Virginia Gray's brother, William Tannen? One of the blandest
who switches
actors.
allegiance, doesn't he? So
goodness. You're going to marry Tommy? Yeah. Well, in that case, I'm going to stop everything I've been building up to for the last 6 years. And,
Maybe I won't help Grover kill all those people.
Now, did he go to prison?
My murdering days are over.
Was there collusion here? But I mean, did he go to jail? I mean, was he? I mean, this whole scandal. This would have been the cover of the Times for 6 months. You know, the whole Grover affair.
Audiences were very disappointed that none of this was cleared up in A Night in Casablanca.
But yeah, I found that interesting. And then there was that quick cutaway to him untying Virginia Gray, who was tied to a chair in front of the time clock. Why was she? Why wasn't she in a closet or somewhere more secretive, rather than a place where employees come in and punch in? I mean, there's another interesting aspect of this film. Was it an afterthought? Was that the only set up at the time? I mean, what was the deal? Yeah, okay. So we're leading up to the
Tenement Symphony, I'm afraid.
I didn't want to be the one to say it either.
We can't really stall any longer, I'm afraid. Here it comes.
the tenuous symphony. Oh boy.
Schubert wrote a coup. Too bad he didn't finish
it and then diminish it.
Is that Sig Ruman singing the Tenement Symphony?
We could only hope.
Yes, the Tenement Symphony. It's a big, splashy number.
With a big, splashy introduction from Virginia Gray stepping right out of an MGM Our Gang musical short. Oh, my God. And we finally get to see the professor.
That's who that guy is?
Oh, yes.
That's
who that is.
Okay.
And I just put that together last night watching the film.
Right.
I couldn't believe it. It's
and
like we never.
Kids
I always just say they talk about the professor, this revered professor, and we never see him. And then I noticed that we actually do. He got out of his sickbed to conduct those children.
And the nicest thing about this for me is that unlike Sing While You Sell, Chico's there. Chico and Harpo have a nice little moment in this, don't they?
Yes,
right.
They do.
And Chico does a little Gershwin-esque riff on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of all this. It's very interesting. It made me wonder if he was actually playing.
I was thinking that.
It might have been the same person who did Harpo's harp solos.
Yes, we don't actually see his hands attached to his body, do we?
No,
We see him playing, and then we see a close-up of some hands. Yes.
And it's a very intricate little piece that he plays there, a little section.
Far be it from me to cast aspersions, but yes, we don't actually see those hands attached to anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. He felt as long as he got as many piano solos as Groucho did.
Yeah.
Yes. The Tenement Symphony itself. What do we think? Because
let's talk about this.
I don't have a big problem with it. It's not something that I love, but I don't hate it.
It's interrupted whatever slight momentum this film has built.
That is my complaint. That is my main complaint, Bob. That's very perceptive of you. The movie's sailing along. It's very pleasant. It's not their greatest film at all, but it's a pleasant experience. And then we get to that point, and you actually smell the rubber. You hear the brakes screech. And we have to sit there and listen to this, what seems like a 15-minute song, stopping the momentum completely. That's my argument with it. It's not a bad melody. It's actually a very pretty melody. The lyrics, but it does stop everything dead.
Much like I thought that the scene towards the end of the races with the African Americans, it was a good scene. It just didn't belong there at that point in the film.
Well, I could say that about a few scenes in A Day at the Races. I think it's such a stop and start, plotting sort of film, mostly because of that. I'd say, but in this one, I just think you hit it on the head, Bob. It just stops the movie dead in its tracks.
A lot of people complain about the lyrics being a schmaltzy sort of version of tenement life. The kid on the first floor practicing the minuets. I mean, you wonder how much a feature of I don't remember anyone doing that in Dead End. I remember a kid on the first floor practicing a minuet, or even somebody practicing the rumba.
I can't come out, guys. I'm practicing my minuet. Yeah.
This idea that it's a very rose-tinted view of tenement life. My friend Richard and I, we used to watch the movies together as a kid, we did improve the lyrics in one respect to give it a bit more hard, a harder edge of social realism, which was to change the lyrics thus: the cry of a vendor, the leer of a sex offender.
And that brings us back to Hiram Phelps.
Yeah. Or it's Tom Lehrer now, my hometown.
And they have lots of reason to believe that there are murderers running loose in the store, but they're going to bring a bunch of children in to perform for everybody.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and I missed one important point to me about Groucho. When he's still asleep in the bed, and Virginia Gray's brother comes over to wake him up to tell him there are killers in the store and they're going to kill Tommy Rogers. He wakes up just enough to tell Harpo and Chico and then goes back to sleep.
Yeah. That was my biggest laugh in the film.
I love that. Groucho's back. It's like, who cares? I'm going to sleep. I was up till 5 a.m. doing the books with him. I don't need to save him. So anyway, Tenement Symphony. What do you think, Matt? You like it, Matthew?
I don't dislike it. I mean, I think I like I think it's a nice tune, and I think it's got a certain sweep to it. I mean, as a part of that film, obviously it comes in too late, much as the harp solo in Go West, which I quite like on its own terms, just comes in too late. It stops the film when it's just kind of getting off its ass. The same thing with that, but I'm not sure why it's hated so much. I mean, I sort of get Two Blind Loves.
Oh yeah.
Two Blind Loves. I mean, even that doesn't bother me too much, but I understand why that's kind of the worst. But this one,
I went to a benefit in the early 1980s, and the host was this cheesy, almost Catskills type of comic, and he wanted to do a song, and he started introducing this song as one of the most neglected, one of the most beautiful, one of the most important pieces, I think, that came out of Hollywood. And sure enough, he started singing the Tenement Symphony. And you could hear jaws dropping around the room, not unlike Tom and Jerry, the kong, 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 I couldn't believe it. But anyway, and like I said, in England, it was very much appreciated.
Yeah, and other people did versions of it, and it was quite a hot thing. I suppose because we had a more sentimental view of that New York tenement life. I suppose it probably seemed much more hokey in America than it did to us.
I guess it also helps justify having his name up there above the title.
Tony Martin.
Yeah, he's got to be more than just a romantic lead. He's got to have a real showcase.
And in true MGM fashion, it just reeks of importance this time, right?
Yes.
It's like at the end of the Gershwin story when they play Rhapsody in Blue. It's kind of on that level of importance in this film.
Do you think there's something about this? May be more broadly true of Hollywood than just the MGM Marx Brothers films, but it seems to me that in all the MGMs, the hero, the male lead, always has to be working class, this kind of working class striver. And, they go to great lengths to make it clear that Tommy Rogers, what's his name?
Tommy Rogers.
Tommy Rogers. I can't even remember who the hell he is, but he comes from this modest background, and it's celebrated in the Tenement Symphony the same way, Baroni in A Night at the Opera has to be the struggling singer, and the villains are always people of means.
It was their version of someone to root for. But Kenny Baker kind of goes against that, though, in At the Circus. He's a little rich boy. Playing.
He's a rich boy, but he's slumming, isn't he?
Slumming.
He's kind of he's found authenticity in the streets.
He can't tell a donut from a wedding cake.
He is the most nearsighted of the heroes.
And when he gets knocked out, he deserved it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I know. I wanted to see him dead, but. So where are we?
Okay, so let's. We're at the big.
We're leading up to the
signing
big finale.
Party. And murder. Somebody they said we're going to sign the checks, sign the contract, and then it's just suggested, hey, why don't we make a thing of that?
Right.
And then suddenly this whole big thing is planned, isn't it? Suddenly the press is filling the room.
Slow news
and
day.
Grover thinks, I know. This place is full of press, so let's kill Tommy actually here, now. Not tomorrow. Not at 2:00 tomorrow morning when he's in bed. Let's do it right now, in front of the press, with a gun, in a camera that I've put in there, with no gloves on.
I love once he switches out the cameras, he looks at Bradley Page like, look what I did. Isn't that
great? It's the old gun in the camera ploy. He must be counting on it to be the same photographer in Monkey Business who didn't know Harpo was under the clock.
But you would think this Machiavellian, almost Shakespearean villain would have better sense than to put a gun in a camera.
And you would think that they're going to shoot a wide shot of all these people signing a contract. Why would the gun fire a bullet right at Tommy?
Tommy.
Well, they were going to take a picture just of Tommy. That was the thing. But how did he know that was going to be the camera on a table full of cameras?
I'm no expert about cameras, but I presume you can't just put a gun in one and it'll fire. So
it's like an ingredient.
So that's his plan, and amazingly, it doesn't go to plan.
Well, let's talk about the photograph that does get taken.
Oh my!
Which is brilliant, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
it's one of my favorite photographs.
Perfectly in focus, even though it was taken during a move. You know, Grover was grabbing her and pulling her through the curtain, but it looks like they're posing at the MGM publicity department with perfect lighting, and everybody's in perfect focus.
I love Groucho in that photo. He's back at his Go West publicity still best, isn't he? He does not want to be. He does not want to get involved in that.
Maybe he sensed how ridiculous it was. Oh my!
My favorite line is when Grover says, "No, don't take my photo," and nobody knows at that point why. We don't know yet, because in a minute he says, doesn't he, there's a gun concealed on one of those cameras. He says, no, don't take a picture. And Chico says, go on, take his picture.
Like he knew.
So presumably just simply because Grover doesn't want him to. He doesn't know anything about the gun. Go on, take his picture. That'll piss him off. For some reason, he doesn't want his photo taken. Go on, do it.
And we all know that Chico's character is perceptive enough to sense Grover's uncomfortable attitude toward getting his picture taken. So he assumes there must be some sort of weapon in that camera. That's how I justify that scene. But anyway, so we're skipping the major bone of contention in this film, and that's the finale, the roller skating finale.
Yes, here it comes. Yes.
Okay, now I'll sit tight while you guys chew on this for a while, because I have my own feelings about it.
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it if it was actually funny. I wouldn't mind it not being the Marxes. I wouldn't mind the doubles. I wouldn't mind anything if it was actually funny. But it's not the Marxes. It's not funny. So what do you got left?
Okay.
I prefer it to the Go West train, and I prefer it to the At the Circus cannon, guerrilla scene. That doesn't mean I love it. I don't think it's brilliant. I think of those big MGM slapstick chase up the wall, down the wall, firing out the gun style finales, it is my favorite of the three. Again, I think it has an energy to it that I respond to. I mean, I was watching it on Sunday on my little VHS player with my little television, and my son came in and he thought it was brilliant. He's 5 years old, and he made me put it on again, and I thought, he's not the most discerning audience in the world, but there's something to be said for that. I think it is, I like the happiness of it. I like the inventiveness. I mean, he loved him swinging on those lights.
The light fixtures.
Light fixture things. I prefer it to the previous two, is about the best I can say for it, but that's something, isn't it?
I'm with you, Matthew, on that. Noah?
Yeah, that's essentially the way I feel about it. I mean, I don't know that I would rank it above. The train thing in Go West is not at all my kind of sequence, but its ingeniousness does redeem it a little bit. This one I find a little less ingenious and therefore harder to get through. And yeah, I mean, as Bob points out, it seems so far from the essence of the Marx Brothers, and to see them, particularly at this point, doing this kind of Max Sennett sped up camera chase scene when they get on roller skates. I think I mentioned it in our episode where we talked about our least favorite moments.
Yeah.
For me, this is one of them. It's not because I despise it and have a big case to make out against it, but it feels to me like a little embarrassing to watch them go through this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with Matthew as far as it being the best finale of the three, of the two, or the three last MGM films, final MGM films. The train sequence I find deadly dull. Despite the fact that it's maybe the concept is brilliant, and some of the Buster Keaton gags are which I think would have been much better had he been doing them. And the dialogue Groucho is forced to say is just, I find embarrassing. I think that's the opinion of that finale is so overblown and so I just don't understand it personally.
Mm-hmm.
The finale to The Big Store, when I was in 5th grade, which means I was about 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old, I knew The Big Store was on television that day, and I couldn't, for some reason, I couldn't fake sick that day, and which is what I would usually do. And I convinced my teacher to let us watch the last 15 minutes, which unfortunately had the Tenement Symphony in it. But when the finale came on, I never heard such laughter in my life from a room full of 11 and 12-year-olds. It was absolutely deafening how loud the laughter was and how sustained it was. I've also seen it get that reaction in screenings of the film with audiences. It is Noah mentioned it. It's a Max Sennett scene. It's a Max Sennett finale. And to me, yes, they're using stuntmen. It's very, very atypical of the Marx Brothers. But I find it rather enjoyable. And I do find it funny, Bob. I think there are some very funny gags in it. I do like when Johnny Burks, as the janitor, his head is up there with the other head models, and then you see him move and he goes down again. It always surprises me when that happens. And there are some moments in it that are just delightful to me. I don't know.
I've just never appreciated that Sennett type of humor done later in the sound era when they tried to recreate that type of madcap, with sped up cameras and sound effects, in the 30s and 40s and 50s. That type of thing's never worked. I appreciate the original Sennett type of humor, but not the recreations or the revisits to it.
Right. I understand.
And yet you're a mad world fan, are you not?
It seems like in so many ways the film career of the Marx Brothers is a reaction against that style, which, I appreciate it too.
That's true. That's true.
I enjoy silent comedy and I enjoy Max Sennett, but it is a revolutionary thing when the Marx Brothers come along and really make antique the sort of Keystone Cops style of comedy.
Yes.
And again, this was popular during that time. Again, they're embracing the time they're in at this point. Let's face it, Matthew, a lot of the Abbott and Costello finales are this kind of chase, where they're doing impossible gags and cartoon gags and all of that. It never bothered me. Even Red Skelton, who was doing this maybe into the 1950s, his films, Bob Hope also was doing this kind of thing. Frank Tashlin was responsible for a lot of that.
Yes.
So I always find it kind of enjoyable. I enjoy it.
Yes.
And it's a grand slam finish, as far as I'm concerned.
It is. Yeah, and a nice sort of grand slam finish to their career. And it's almost like they're sort of allowing themselves that now.
Yeah.
We've made all these films, and now let's just go for broke with a big splashy, physical sequence. One of the interesting things about it, though, which I should quickly stress, is the amount of reverse printed scenes in it. You'll notice that Douglas Dumbrill's side parting changes from left to right quite a lot, and when Harpo goes into the lift, if you look at the sign next to the lift, the writing is backwards. Apparently there were some mistakes made during the shooting with regards to point of view shots where the characters were looking and things. The motion of the scene is basically right to left, but there are some left to right shots that they had to switch. And a lot of the original reviewers, particularly in the trades, who the people that knew what they were looking at, made this point that it was very badly edited. So it's worth noting that ironically the editor of the film was a man called Konrad Nervig, who actually won the first ever Oscar for editing back in 1933 for a film called Eskimo.
That's an excellent film, by the way, if you ever get the chance.
Really? I've never seen it.
Excellent.
But there's a lot of corrective work is done in this final, and an awful lot of it is reverse printed.
By the way, Dumbrill's stunt double is one of the worst matches I've ever seen.
I agree with you. I think out of all of them, his was the worst. You're right.
It's a guy 20 years younger with dark hair.
You're right.
It can't be as bad as the Curly Howard ones with a full head of hair. Like when he falls off his chair in Disorder in the Court, and this guy's got a quiff.
There's a couple of shots in this chase sequence where Groucho is a very different looking man.
Yeah, he's much more square-jawed.
Yes.
You know, definitely younger and a better-looking man than Groucho was.
I do enjoy the few moments where we actually see the Marxists skating in this.
Me too.
There are a couple of shots where it is them, isn't there?
Yeah.
Where it is unequivocally them. And
yeah.
It served Chico well later when he was roller skating with that team.
His second career as a roller skater.
As a roller skater. You pay me, I do it. I like the final scene, by the way, with Charles Lane.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Very
it's one
nice.
of their better
Very
endings.
nice, yeah. When you think Go West has got that horrible ending, hasn't it?
The
where
worst.
the bloke falls in a hole and they shake hands.
Yeah.
Terrible. At the Circus is my favourite of all their endings.
That's mine too, Matthew. But I think this one is kind of right up there. I like A Night in Casablanca too.
Not bad. Yeah.
But if something like that could only happen to me, and then they run after her, I think that's a very funny ending. But I like this one.
I think we're basically all agreed, aren't we? This is a film that is not in any way great, but not in any way painful. It's an enjoyable, pleasant, underrated movie. Would we all say that?
I have to add that out of all of the Marx Brothers films, I think I OD'd on the Paramounts to the point where I don't watch them as much. Of the MGMs, I have to say that The Big Store is the one I go back to more than any of the others. And I can't tell you why. I mean, could I tell you a quick story?
We got the tape.
That sounds like a yes.
Okay, thank you. When I was 9 years old, my mom went back to work and we were home alone on Easter vacation, so there was no school. And that morning, The Big Store was coming on television at 9 a.m. Now, at about 8:30 in the morning, I was already pacing, waiting for the film. I'm 9 years old. And I decided to kill time. I would lift myself up on my kitchen counter and try to open up the cabinet with my mouth. Now, we had these round metal knobs on the kitchen cabinets. And I'm doing this, and I'm thinking, boy, look how clever I am. I don't need my hands to open the kitchen counter. This is why people looked at me funny back then and continue to do so to this day. But my hand slipped, and my front teeth broke in half. It was quite traumatic. And all hell broke loose. We got in touch with our neighbor who was going to drive me to where my mother was working at the time, and I knew it was going to be a horrible scene. These were my adult teeth, so, it was over. And while I was waiting for the neighbor to pick me up and take me to what I was sure was going to be pure hell, I sat down and turned on The Big Store. And I forgot about my troubles for about 15 minutes. So maybe that's why this film is so special to me. And why it's my second favorite of the MGM films, even over A Day at the Races.
I have a little different origin story on this film. It's one of the two Marx films I vividly recall the first time I saw, the other being Animal Crackers. But the first time I saw The Big Store was when I was in high school, and they were having a Marx Brothers festival, and I went on a day where they were showing A Night at the Opera and then The Big Store. And I had read, some of the books on The Big Store, and I knew it wasn't considered one of the best, but I figured, hey, it's the Marxes, and they showed opera first, which might not have been the best choice for this. And, everybody was rolling in the aisles, and it just got a tremendous response. And then The Big Store started, and there were chuckles and a lot of silence and people starting to walk out. And it was somewhat depressing for me. And I don't necessarily think it was because it was that bad a film, but just the contrast to opera, which had just played before, it was very vivid and was very apparent. Now, over the years, I've come to appreciate the film more, and I do like it quite a bit, but I don't necessarily think it's particularly funny. It's more likable than funny. I actually laugh more at Go West and at the circus, so I can't necessarily say that this is a the best of their later MGMs, but I can understand why people enjoy it because it is very likable.
It's a very likable film.
Yeah.
You're right. But who planned that screening? Ben Turpin?
Well, it's one of those things where they had, like 3 nights and they had like 2 films each night. And,
Right. I always found it interesting, the movies they paired, Yeah. I was very lucky in the fact that I saw a double feature of Horse Feathers and Monkey Business. And it was the first time I saw the two of them, was in a theater. And that was the best way to see them for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gabby. You hear Gabby?
Hey.
Hey, Gabby.
The famous
That's
Gabby.
the Gabster. We got her on the podcast.
Can I mention 2 other moments from the film that I noted here?
No, we're talking about Gabby.
No.
Well, early in the film, when Tommy gets knocked down the elevator, in the aftermath, Chico starts following this guy who looks like Truman Capote. Does everybody notice that?
You're right.
He's the winner of the Truman Capote lookalike contest.
And the other one, refresh my memory, what was the scene where there was like 2 mannequins and it turns out one of them is a real person?
Oh, yeah. Chico flips the wig on one and then Harpo tries and he gets slapped. Yeah.
Yeah, Chico thinks it's hilarious that he's doing that, doesn't he? Before any error is made, Chico just thinks that's a funny thing to do. Yeah.
Sure. He knows there's a camera. He knows there's a gun in the camera, but he doesn't know. But he finds amusement by this. The Big Store I've seen with audiences, and it didn't get the response that you're describing, Bob. But I could understand that if you watch A Night at the Opera first, and then you watch, The Big Store, it's kind of like watching a Hal Roach, Our Gang, and then watching one of those MGM abortions. I would walk out too, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it also has something to do with where you are with the Marx Brothers. I mean, if you're a fan and you're fully aware of how brilliant they are at their best, then watching these lesser entries, is fine. It's a little bit more of these great artists, and The Big Store is indeed a happier experience than some of the other later films. But somebody who doesn't know them very well, if they say, "Oh yeah, you're a big Marx Brothers fan, aren't you? I thought I'd maybe take a look at The Big Store." You would say, no, don't. That camera has a gun in it,
Well, actually, though, it's one of those things that maybe your perception is soured by how good you think the other films are, and if you've seen this first, you might enjoy it quite a lot.
Oh yeah, we know people like that, don't we? Who saw it first and loved it, and it opened the door.
Well, when I was growing up, the Marx Brothers could do no wrong. I mean, you could have shown them, pouring water into the ocean, and people would have thought it was brilliant. There was no discernment back then. It didn't matter which films they were showing. They always got the same response. Roars of laughter, including The Big Store and Go West and At the Circus, which now I look at, now that I've become more of an adult and I look at it with a more discerning eye. They're clearly not the best work or deserving of that kind of response. But again, like we said, I think The Big Store is the most likable of the MGM films other than A Night at the Opera. Wasn't
it James G who said, "Christ, even The Big Store's okay"?
Yeah, I think that's the quote. Yeah.
That's what he said, yes.
Such eloquence. Oh.
Okay, are we done?
I think we're done.
Do you have anything to plug?
Oh, sure. I'm appearing at a wonderful theater here in Los Angeles called the La Mirada Theater. It's owned by Kathy Rigby of Olympic fame. And I'm playing John Hancock in the musical 1776. Yes. We also have a DVD for sale. It's also streaming on Amazon Prime and all the other venues. It's The Misadventures of Biffle and Schuster, America's favorite fake comedy team from the 1930s.
I know our listeners don't look to me for sincerity, but if you've no idea what Nick's talking about, please do check this out, because it's genuinely really, really good. If you like this stuff, if you like the kind of stuff we're talking about, this is really going to blow you away.
Thank you,
and
Matthew.
I mean that most sincerely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll link it up.
A lot of love and care went into it by a lot of people who love the comedy from this era. And we do have some fine people in support. We have Academy Award nominee Robert Forster. We have actually an Academy Award winner for special effects. He plays the gorilla in The Bride of Finkelstein, Chris Wallace. And we also have H.M. Walker, who was in one of the best of the Twilight Zone episodes among many, many film and television appearances. He was the one. Do you remember he unlocks the devil from its cage when he's warned not to? I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's a very famous one. John Carradine is also in it. Mm-hmm. Just some wonderful supporting people in the cast, and I think you'll see it as the true labor of love that it was. So check it out: The Misadventures of Biffle and Schuster.
We'll put some links to some of Nick's stuff on our website, marxbrotherscounselpodcast.com.
And just before we go, Nick, a quick bit of Cary Grant, please.
I suppose because it's my duty. But darling, there's a body in the window seat.
It sounds like Hiram Phelps to me. Yeah.
Okay, I'm calling time.
They actually shared a house together in Malibu.
I'm calling time.
I'm not a cab driver. I'm a coffee pot.
Thanks, fellas. I enjoyed myself.
The next edition of the Marx Brothers Council podcast will be based on the Broadway musical of the same name and banned by Mussolini, thus causing and curing indigestion at the same time. Until then, here's our special guest, Nick Santamaria, to sing If It's You.
If it's you, when a knock comes at my door, if it's you, then I rush across the floor. But if you're not there, the sky falls on my schemes again. I close the door and rush back to my dreams again. When I'm blue and a knock comes in the gloom, if it's you, there's a rainbow in my room. And when someone kneels with someone, making vows for two, if it's me, I'll be in heaven. If it's you, la da dum, la da 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 dum, la da dee dee, la da dum, la da 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 dum, la da da dum, la da dum, la da 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 dum, la da 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 da, la da dum, la da da dum, la da 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 dum da dum. When I'm blue and a knock comes in the gloom, if it's you, there's a rainbow in my room. And when someone kneels with someone, making vows for two, if it's me, I'll be in heaven. If it's me, I'll be in heaven. If it's me, I'll be in heaven. If it's you.